All the news is revolving around what's happening in the Middle East, maybe Ukraine, maybe the LA riots or protests. But the reality is Donald Trump probably won because of the economy promises and also because of what's happening at the border. To that end, I've got to bring back our good friend. It's Vance Ginn, PhD, former chief economist of the Trump White House, vanceginn.com. Vance, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, I'm doing well, Joe. How you doing?
I'm living the dream. So we don't talk about the economy much when there's like, oh my God, what's going on in Israel? Holy crap, what's going on, at the border? What's going on with LA? But the fact is the economy is slowly but surely and steadily getting much better. I mean, we're hearing about energy prices down 20%, egg prices down 61%. I don't know what the stock market is doing, Vance. I don't watch it that often, to be honest with you. But economically speaking, if you were to just give me, okay, from January 20th till today, things are looking pretty good, no?
I think so. I mean, you definitely have a lot more supply was stifled for a number of years. That's now been opened up. A lot of deregulation has already went into place as well. I mean, really starting on day one from the Trump administration. And what that does is it starts to unleash all this supply that's been held out over the last couple of years. And that's come to fruition. I think we still have some uncertainty in the economy. We have some inflation it is moderating more than I think many expected during this short period of time, but it's still pretty high. So there's still things that need to be done. But look, we're only, 5 months into the Trump administration, and there already are some highlights to think about.
It is Vance Ginn. You can go to vanceginn.com or go follow him, Vance, Ginn, over on X. Always appreciate the knowledge and the time. So as we're watching, you say regulations are down and we can go out and we actually have more supply. What does that mean in the real world? What changed? What did Trump change? What did his team change when he got back into office that immediately said, now more supply can happen. Now you can go and maybe drill, maybe you can go and find resources. Why is the supply better? What did he do?
Well, I mean, a key part of this was on energy. And you just mentioned drilling. There was a lot more opening up of drilling, removing some of those regulations, allowing for permits to be made faster than what the Biden administration was doing. And when you start doing that sort of thing on the drilling side, well, then that, filters over to a lot of other goods and services that we buy that are based on oil, right? To some capacity, and gas in our cars and everything else. And so that is a big part of this. But you've also seen that the direction where things go, when businesses start to plan for the future, they look at their expectations, and the expectations under Biden was higher regulations and higher taxes. Now you have a situation where you have more certainty about deregulation for the future, lower taxes in the future, and then there's still some uncertainty about what's happening with trade and these new deals that are going on. But at the end of the day, I do think that there is more confidence now that Trump has been in there compared with the Biden administration.
It is Vance Ginn. Vance, let's talk tariffs a little bit. I know that you and I are a little bit opposite on tariffs. I'm fine with it to force, with our leverage, an equal playing field when it comes to trade. I'm also for it to make sure that our employees here, or actually those who employ people here, our employers, are getting a fair shake at paying people a living wage when they're paying them nothing in China, nothing in India. I think that the tariffs are working to an extent. But you're not like a long-term tariff guy. Are you okay using them for leverage, at least in the short term?
I'd rather use other things for leverage, Joe. I mean, I would rather us use taxes and cutting things that are reducing the size and scope of government. To me, and when you look at it, right, when you expand tariffs, for example, you're expanding the size and scope of government, because now you're getting into other markets where you weren't otherwise. You're imposing costs that compared with the exchanges that are happening between individuals. Countries don't trade, it's people. And so the way that I look at it is that these are voluntary transactions that happen. Now, there are national security things that are going on, right? That would be outside of that scope that I think should actually be done more from the executive branch and more of the military or things through our knowledge that we're gathering from them versus using tariffs as an economic tool to try to bring them to the table. Because at the end of the day, Joe, we had a deal with them in the first Trump administration with China, and they didn't abide by it. And so even if we get a deal with China or many other countries, will they cheat? And we need to look at, are these deals more costly than before the deal happened? And we're seeing that some now already.
Well, China is, of course, the one that we're going to point to, but it turns out everybody we were trading with was screwing us somehow percentage-wise on tariffs. How do you make them stop doing that if you don't hit back?
Yeah. I think the way that you hit back is by making it more affordable, cheaper to do business here in America. And the more that we're pointing at other countries, I think we've still got fingers pointing back at ourselves. And that comes with less government spending at the federal level, lower taxes and deregulation, and I think more trade with our allies. I mean, if we are going to go after China, why not trade more with our allies? And that puts us in a broader range of countries and other developed countries that could put pressure on China. Because at the end of the day, China's not going to care about just one country. Yes, we are a lot of size and everything else, but what if we had multiple states that were in agreement that we want lower trade barriers, not higher? I think that would put more pressure on China to improve than any tariff would.
Well, you said taxes a couple of times. I think you and I agree. I don't know why we have a 21% tax rate. It was 35% corporate tax rate, but 21 is still too much. Why isn't that zero? Already the people that run the corporation are being taxed. Why would you have a corporate tax rate? It's double taxation, obviously. And you're right. You wouldn't need tariffs. If there's a 0% corporate tax rate, all the corporations come back.
Right. Amen. So businesses don't pay taxes, people do, through the form of higher prices, lower wages, fewer jobs, and less shareholder value. So when you're looking at this from that perspective, we should have zero corporate income tax because there's double taxation that's in there. And again, businesses don't pay taxes. Remember, Joe, if my house that I'm in right now starts to pay me money somehow or paid taxes, that would be crazy. Right? It would be insane. But that's how some people view businesses, that somehow this structure is paying taxes. No, it's the people within it, not the structure itself. And I do agree that we should be at 0%. If not, why not go back to 15% that Trump's been talking about as well? I mean, that would be also be pro-growth.
It's Vance Ginn. Go and follow him, vanceginn.com. He's a PhD, former chief economist at the White House. Were you at the White House and doing that job when the pandemic hit, or was it after that?
Yeah. So I got there in June of 2019 and was there through May of 2020. So it was a wild year, Joe. I mean, I moved my whole family up there to McLean, Virginia, and loved it. It was a great experience. But the first couple of months there, I was helping Trump write what ended up being his last budget, where we found $4.6 trillion in savings. But then there was the impeachment hearings, and then right after that, COVID. And then I found myself in the Situation Room, and I was trying to make a strong case that we should not shut down. I was trying to pitch that as the trade-offs and the economics. And at the end of the day, I didn't win that argument. And I decided, you know what? I need to go back home to Texas where there's some more freedom compared to what's going on in Washington.
Well, I'm glad you're back in Texas. Of course, that's where I am as well. But the reason I ask is that we added like $2 trillion in pandemic spending to our overall spending. Once the pandemic ended, and Joe Biden said it ended at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit like 2.5-3 years ago, why didn't we just immediately roll that money back? How does that work where you increase emergency spending by trillions of dollars and you don't decrease it once the emergency's over?
Insanity. It really is insanity, Joe. I mean, when you think about the national debt, $37 trillion, and how much it increased in just the deficit during that period, and let's say that it was all for good, like we should have done all these things, you should start clawing that back after it's over, to your point. But what happens is what I call budget inertia, is when you get this government spending growing, it increases the number of bureaucrats, it increases the number of layers of government bureaucracy, and when that gets entrenched, it becomes something that keeps growing after that. And so it's very difficult to say, okay, we went from $4.6 trillion to $7 trillion now. How do we cut the $2 trillion plus? And it makes it very difficult. I think Elon Musk did a great job going in with Doge and doing as much as possible. But he also found out how difficult it is to really try to cut $2 trillion without touching a lot of Medicaid or Medicare or Social Security or defense, because that's 80%, 85% of the budget.
If everybody who qualifies for Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare still get it, the ones only who qualify, not the fraud, waste, and abuse, you're looking at still a huge chunk of the government spending. But then on the discretionary side, you've got a whole bunch that you can save there. But as you said, you've got a bunch of more bureaucrats that are in there that were hired because of the increased spending. They're not gonna speak out and say, please take away my money. Please stop paying me. So how in the real world can you do it? You just have to say, too bad. You got to go. I mean, at some point, we've got to get back to fiscal responsibility, don't we?
We really do. And I mean, there's more than
but how do you do it?
Million. Well, I think it started when the Trump administration came in. They started having some of these firings that took place. Actually, it wasn't even firings. People voluntarily chose not to do that when they gave them the choice of the severance package. That helped weed out some of them. But I think there's a longer process to where they should be letting go of many of these people. If we're going to close down the Department of Education, which some have talked about, and the president has mentioned this as well, shouldn't we just get rid of all of the people that are working there as well? Or are they just going to shift them around? Yes, I agree with you. We should. and that's going to increase unemployment for a period of time. But remember, every government job has to come on the back of a taxpayer. Right? It's not there's a cost to having each one of those people in government, and we're seeing that. And so at some point, you've got to not only cut the regulations and spending, but you got to cut the personnel as well. And that will allow for less budget inertia in the future.
Did you ever see the court system jumping in to tell the executive you can't fire people in your branch? Literally, there are district courts doing nationwide injunctions stopping President Trump from doing what's in his purview in the executive. And if you were in the White House now, how would you advise him save the money even as these court rulings are going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd want to keep making it say, look, this is what worked well, this is what didn't. I'm not there internally right now, but I mean, they found some good ways of going about this and setting up the case where as soon as that decision's made, which I think, I mean, likely it's going to be in their favor, then they can continue to proceed and find a good orderly way to do this. I mean, it is tough in a sense of you just shut down something and get rid of all the employees. How are you going to keep functioning for a period of time? But I think if you give them a month, a couple months, something like that, that starts
Right.
to wean them off of that, or to have a landing period for them to find another job or whatever else, that would put us in a much better situation than what we're in today.
It is, again, our friend Vance Ginn, PhD, former chief economist to the Trump White House. Go to vanceginn.com or go follow him at Vance Ginn over on socials. Let's talk about inflation and whether we can actually have deflation. Because we say inflation is down, that just means that the rate that we're aggregating just is lower than what it was under Biden. But we're still seeing inflation every single month. We're nowhere near where it was, 6 years ago or whatever, when Trump was in the first time 5 years ago. So with the inflation going up, we're happy that the rate that it's going up is lower. Is there such a thing as deflation? Can we revalue the dollar and see costs go down?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And so right now, inflation's running about 2.4%. If you look at CPI headline inflation, you exclude food and energy, what they like to do, because that's less volatile part of our budget, because prices of food and energy go up and down quite a bit. Then that's closer to 2.8, 2.9%. But that's much lower than it was under 9% under Biden a couple of years ago. And then now it's continued to go down, but it's still up there a little bit. I don't know that we'll see deflation for a while. And the reason why I say that is because when the federal government's running this much of deficits and debt, $2 trillion a year, and you have that push up interest rates, the increase in supply of bonds that pushes up interest rates in the market. And the Federal Reserve, they said today on Wednesday that they're not going to change the federal funds rate. It's staying between 4.25 to 4.5%. So when those rates start going above their targeted rate, what they do is they put more money into the economy, and that helps to bring down a lot of those interest rates, right? They buy bonds and increase demand and pushes down interest rates. But what it also does is it increases inflation, because now they're going to print more money and put it into the economy. And so while we have seen some moderation of inflation, I'm not sure how long that's going to last if we keep running massive deficits and the Fed keeps printing too much money. And so that's something that I'm going to keep watching, Joe, throughout this process.
Does the Fed have its own autonomy when it wants to print money, or is that from a wink and a nod from the executive? When do they decide to print money, and can they take money out of circulation to, again, boost how much my money is worth?
Yes. So when the Fed was created in the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, basically they're an independent body. They get funding from the private banks across the country, but it's put in place by Congress, and they have a dual mandate, right? Price stability and full employment. There's another one on interest rate, maintaining interest rates, but that one's not talked about as much. But those first two are really important for what they're doing, and they try to be independent or whatever. But what we've seen, right, is that there's dependency between the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. Fiscal policy wants to keep running up deficits and spend too much, and that's raising interest rates, while the Fed wants to keep interest rates low. And so as long as that's going on, the Fed is going to keep printing money. There's not really a huge cap on what they can do or anything else. I've advocated, if we're going to keep the Federal Reserve, and look, my cards on the table, I'd like to see the end of the Federal Reserve. But until then, we should have a monetary rule to where there's not as much money growth. This is what Milton Friedman talked about way back in the day. This is just let money not grow by too much, and then you have less inflation over time. And unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to happen for a while, Joe, because of the deficits and the lack of spending restraint. And even under this big, beautiful bill, I would like to see a little bit more fiscal restraint. I'm not going to lie. I think some of the stuff is pro-growth that's in the tax part of it, but we've got to continue to ramp down spending as much as possible.
It is Vance Ginn. Go and follow him everywhere. Very good information as always. Is there any gold at Fort Knox, do you think, Vance?
Who knows, man?
They were going to go, but nobody's gone. Why won't they go? Somebody should go.
That's right. That's right. We need to go check it out.
Now, can we possibly ever, is this just a pipe dream, go back to the gold standard where we actually back up our cash with something?
I think we can, right? I mean, instead of using this fiat currency system we have today, backed by government debt, just back it with gold and make a transferability between those treasury securities and the amount of gold you have. There's some issues with gold standard, right? If we went back to that, the government then has a lot of control over the gold instead of the mining that was done back in the day. And then that could contribute to other problems. I've been more in favor of having more of a basket. Allow for competitive currencies throughout the marketplace. If Bitcoin wants to be a competitive currency, let it go, right? Let competitive currencies come in, and that currency that's going to be best will be the way, instead of having a monopoly dollar, controlled by the Federal Reserve.
It's funny. I go live on TikTok most every night, and people will ask me, what do I think of crypto? I know nothing about it. Now, I'm a technology geek. I built my studios. I know what I'm doing with technology and computers. I don't get that all of my money somehow is encrypted on a hard drive, because I know that hard drives fail. I'm not sure I understand how this whole thing works. This is going to be strange, can you give me a minute, just a primer on what my listeners and viewers and me, what we can go look up and educate ourselves about crypto? I have no clue how this thing works.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's a lot of books out there, but what I would look into is more about the blockchain. Check out the blockchain, how that works, how the information is transcribed within all online through this blockchain that is very tightly, it's not regulated, but it's tightly held, because each one of those transactions have different codes going with them. And it's really just an extraordinary way to exchange things that then connects Bitcoin, this currency, for us to be able to exchange in the process. I think there's a lot of revolutionary attributes to it for the future, but we'll see. But go and check it out some more there.
No, I will definitely do that, because, again, I like having tangible money. Now, I do know that we deal digitally, because I can go online and look at my bank account and see what the totals are there, what the balance is there. But I mean, am I being silly that I fear the technology because it gives hackers a better chance to go and do all they can to get a hold of our stuff?
Well, yes, I think we should have that fear, but I also fear what the Fed is doing. I mean, if they steal a couple of our dollars compared to, we've lost 98% of the value of our dollar since 1913.
Wow.
You talk about robbing us. That's coming at us, and there's nothing else we can do about it. At least we can try to avoid the criminals that are out here, versus whenever they're stealing our money from us directly through inflation and everything else.
But it's great. So I don't want centralized currency. That's a different thing where the government can actually have access. That's a different thing. Let's do another one of these shows coming up soon about Bitcoin or crypto specifically, because I don't, again, I get it a little bit, but I'm not fully aware, so that I can talk to somebody about it intelligently. And you certainly can. So let's do that again. It's Vance Ginn. Go to vanceginn.com, Ginn. Go follow him on social media. Vance, always appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Have a great day.
All right, brother. You too. We're back after this. Stay right here.